Mrs. M. Priyadarshini, ME MBA, is doing PhD, is currently working as teaching fellow in the Department of IST, Anna University, Chennai. She completed a master's in software engineering from Anna University. She has about 10 years of experience in handling courses for UG and PG. She was serving as technical evangelist for corporate over 4 years in Java Enterprise Technologies, software engineering, databases, OOAD, and design patterns. She is proficient in handling IT projects as well into concept development for enterprises. She is doing a research in the area of web services security. Her other areas of interest include software engineering, OOAD, databases, enterprise technologies, and service-oriented architecture. She holds many journal publications and conference proceedings in her research area.
Welcome to UGC lecture series in computer science part 25. In this session we are going to discuss about event delegation model and a few sample programs also, and also we are going to see a list of events that are handled by your AWT components. So, you can see here this is the event delegation model. So, in order to understand that, we should know the basics of Windows programming. So, basics of Windows programming is nothing but, so whenever I create a GUI, a window, even it may be in your C or it may be in your C++, what we do is we try to create a window. That window basically is an API, application programming interface. Whatever the event that you do will be passed on as messages to the environment, and based on the messages that is queued, each and every messages are taken and handled. So, for example, if I have a window, if I am trying to close a window, if I am going to open a window, and then if I am going to press my mouse. So, all these events that the user does on the graphical user interface, that is on that particular window, will be sent as messages to the backend, and your environment will handle those messages with the handlers that is written by the user. So, whenever I press this, what should happen? Whenever I press or release my mouse, what should happen? Whenever I try to close my window, what should happen? The same process is being followed in your Java. So, here in Java also we have a set of APIs. So, those APIs are already seen as such your inside your AWT package. So, here inside your AWT package we have few classes called event classes, and then we have few interfaces called listener interfaces. So, these classes, these set of classes which are events are raised by the user's interaction with the components. So, whenever the user tries to do something on the component or your container, so automatically what action is being done, based on that an event will be raised, and then this event will be handled based on the listeners that is written for those particular events. So, here you can see that we have event objects. These event objects are created by event sources. So, here what are all the event sources that we have seen? So, we have seen various components and various containers. So, all these components and containers are the sources of events. So, consider that you have a button, consider that you have a choice menu. So, in case of button, whenever I try to press the button, some action should happen. So, this particular button is the event source which creates an event object. So, the event object that is created is called action event. So, once this action event is created, so there should be some listener which should be listening to this particular event. So, we have an event manager which is going to manage these events. So, this particular events that is created by the event sources are handled by the managers, provided those handlers are included inside your listeners. So, I have a particular event, that event if need to be listened should have some piece of code or handlers that is written for that particular event. So, you can see here we have event listeners. Event listeners are the interfaces for which few of the methods are written. So, these methods are nothing but the handlers which are handled for those particular events that are created. So, these listeners will be registered to the event manager. So, we have add listener methods, we have remove listener methods, and then this event manager is going to fire a particular event. When an event is generated, so corresponding method or handler that is returned will automatically be called. So, all the listeners will be registering to the event through the event manager. So, the methods add listener, remove listener has to be used to register and deregister to the particular events. So, here each and everyone has few responsibilities. So, the event source whenever is being activated by the user or whenever some event is being done on this event source, event objects need to be created. So, the created event objects are captured by the event manager provided the listeners has been registered for those particular events. So, if the listeners for those particular events are registered, then only this event manager could identify that for this particular event there are handlers that need to be handled. So, now whatever the methods that we have is called by the event manager. So, the API user has to implement the method in the listener class. So, the class which has implemented this event listener should write the set of methods. So, this is what is event delegation model. So, for a particular event some work has been delegated. So, what need to be done is decided by the event manager. So, event manager will fire which particular handler need to be called. Event delegation model is based on the following things. One is event source, this class which broadcasts the event. So, this event source is going to broadcast the event. So, event listeners, this class which receives notification of the events. So, listener, there will be some class, this class is going to implement the listener, and then this listener, particular listener will be added using add listener method for that particular component. So, for example, if I have a button, the button raises an action event. So, for this particular button I need to include the action listener. So, where I have written that particular handling mechanism should be provided to that particular listener. So, you can see here event listener should extend java.util.event listener interface. So, all the event listeners has an base interface called java.util.event listener. So, next is event object. So, the object which describes the event. So, it may be action event, it may be mouse event, it may be item event. So, based on the action that is done, your particular event will be raised. So, here this event object should extend java.util.event object class. So, your event manager, this is the class which manages the relationship between the event and the listeners. So, this class will register and deregister the listeners for a particular event. So, you can see here we are about to discuss few events, what is the description and what is the corresponding listener interfaces that need to be registered for handling this particular event. So, here you can see action event. So, when this particular event is generated, action event is generated. So, the object of the action event will be created and thrown. So, we have already seen about exception handling mechanism. In case of exception handling mechanism, whenever there is a particular exception being raised, it will be thrown by your JRE. So, we have handling mechanism which is going to handle that particular exception. Similarly, whenever user is trying to do some action with the particular component, so the event that is for that particular component will be raised and that will be listened by the listeners. So, you can see here action event, this is generated when the button is pressed or when the menu item is selected or list item is double clicked. There are three components which is associated with this action event. So, this action events object will be or instance will be created on any of these particular action done by the user on this particular component. So, you can see whenever the user tries to press the button or whenever I select any one of the item in the menu or whenever I double click the item in the list. So, in that case an event action event will be raised and there should be listener interface implemented by the class So, and this listener should be provided with the handler that could handle this action event. So, on catching this particular action event, what I should do? So, will be specified in that particular class which has implemented this listener. So, listener is an interface which has a set of methods. Here you can see mouse event. So, this mouse event will be raised when the mouse is dragged, moved, clicked, pressed or released, also when enters or exits a component. So, whenever I do some action with my mouse, so in that case my mouse event will be raised. So, the container or the component which is going to raise this mouse. So, when my mouse may be moved on any of the container. So, there will be few methods which will give me where exactly my mouse operation is being done. So, that will be associated with the mouse event and that could be used by the handlers, that is return where your listener class has been implemented. So, you can see we have a listener called mouse listener. So, next we have an event, key event. So, this is generated when input is received from the keyboard. So, I may have a text area, I may have a text field. Whenever I try to give a text contents, whenever I try to give a text contents, automatically my key event will be raised. So, whatever the key that is pressed by the keyboard will be available through your key event object. So, you can have or you can catch the key event object whenever you are trying to use that particular event object. So, you can exactly catch what type of character is being pressed and you can do some action based on that. So, the listener corresponding to this key event is key listener. So, next you can see item event. So, this is generated when checkbox or list item is clicked. So, whenever I try to click a checkbox, so you know what is a checkbox or a list item. So, whenever I double click the list item, my action event will happen. Whenever I click my list item, so in that case my item event will fire. So, whenever this item event is fired, so there will be corresponding listener, the listener is your item listener and there will be methods corresponding to the item listener. So, next is text event. So, this is generated when my value of the text area or text field is changed. So, the listener will be your text listener. So, this is only particularly for your text area or text field, whereas in case of your key event, whatever the key press is received, so that will affect your key event. So, this is not only specific for your text area and text field, whereas here it is only your text event is generated only when you have some contents, text contents on your text area or text field. So, next is your mouse wheel event. So, this is generated when the mouse wheel is moved. So, you know that in your mouse you have wheel movement. So, this could also be tracked based on the mouse movement, also you can do some work. So, in case of your scroll bars, so your vertical scroll bar and your horizontal scroll bar, so while you scroll the contents, then this particular mouse wheel event will be very useful in order to track how much units you have scrolled and so on. So, next is window event. So, this is generated when the window is activated. So, whenever I deactivate it, whenever I de-iconify, open or close. So, this is particularly for your window. So, whenever I say window, you know that your frame, your dialog, your applet all are of type window. So, your base is window and all these are types of window. Open and close is common for all type of windows. So, in case of your window, you have a listener called window listener. So, window listener has n number of methods. These methods, window listener has set of methods. So, all these methods has to be implemented. You know that whenever I have an interface, if I have 10 methods in the interface, all the 10 method has to be implemented by the class which implements that particular interface. So, next is component event. So, this is generated when the component is hidden, moved, resized or set visible. So, there is component event listener. So, here we have seen that components in the sense all your text area, text field, your button, all these are components. Again the containers are also components. So, for that we have event called component event. So, now we will have a short break and then proceed with all the various events and what all the methods you have in various events. come back after the break. So, we will continue with what all the various events that we have in a AWT package. So, we were discussing about component event. So, this component event is for all the components. So, here whenever I am trying to hide the component, whenever I am trying to move the component or resize the component or make it visible, so this will be automatically fired. So, you can see that in your card layout and all, you have various layouts, few of the components could be displayed in one particular point of time whenever I have a particular card need to be displayed. So, in this case and all, whenever I try to make another set of cards to be invisible or whenever I resize it or move it automatically, these type of events will be raised. So, next is container event. So, this is particularly for the container. So, it may be for your panel, it may be for your frame. So, here this is generated when the component is added or removed from the container. So, this is listened by container listener. Statically, if I add contents, that is a different scenario, whereas if I dynamically add the components on a container. So, in that case, this event you can even have a check of the components that is getting added up in your container, and you can do some specific work, I mean handlers, you can write handlers based on what need to be done when a particular components get loaded. So, in which cases I need to process it. So, here next is adjustment event. So, this is generated when scroll bar is manipulated. So, already we have seen mouse wheel event. So, this is generated when the mouse wheel is moved, whereas here this is particularly for scroll bar. So, scroll bar, it is not necessary that always you use the mouse wheel movement in order to scroll your scroll bar. So, even you can use the keys your mouse in order to move between your scroll bar. So, already we have seen how your horizontal and vertical scroll bar are, how you place the what is the meaning of the button and what is the height of your scroll. So, and all these we have already seen. So, whenever I am trying to adjust the scroll bar, so in this case this particular listener will be this particular event will be listened by the adjustment listener, and based on that you can do some content. So, whenever I scroll down, whenever I scroll up, I can do some particular action. So, next is focus event. So, this is generated when component gains or loses keyboard focus. So, the listener, corresponding listener is focus listener. So, whenever I use my tab control, so whenever I have a list of components, I can set my tabs for which could continuously move on between. So, instead of having my mouse movement, just I can give tab and then move on to a particular component. So, whenever my focus is being transferred to a particular component, if I want to do some operation, whenever I lose focus or whenever I move my focus from one particular component to the other, if I want to do some action. So, think that you are going to validate a particular field. So, on validating a particular field, when my focus is lost, just I have a phone number field. So, I can write the validation of the phone number at the end. So, I write all the 10 numbers or 11 numbers, and then when I lose my focus, when I move on to next component, so automatically I can take the value that is assigned to the text field and then I can validate whether this is a proper phone number or a valid phone number or not. Or the same could be done in your text field itself. So, inside your text field, whenever a user presses a particular keyboard character, you can very well trace whether it is a numeric or whether it is an alphabet, and you can restrict the user from entering the particular number. So, if you want to restrict the user from entering alphabets and if you only a particular with the numerals, so then you can restrict on the on your key events, whereas if you want to do some validation at the end or else when you move on to the next field, so you can write it in lost focus. So, similarly, you can choose your events properly and then you can write your code based on which events need to be written with which listeners and what method need to be implemented and what you have to do on the particular handlers. We have a method called get source. So, this is available in all the events. So, here if EVT is an instance of any event class, the source of the event can be found by calling get source method. So, you can see here event.getSource method will always give an object. So, this object is going to be the object which has raised that particular event. So, this is the event source. So, event object is created by your event source and this will be listened by the listener. So, this listener is registered to your event manager. I can get the source. So, here because events can be caused by a variety of components. So, get source returns an object reference. So, we have already seen that one event can be raised by any of the components. So, whenever I say action performed, so already we have seen that button will raise an action perform, your menu item may raise an action perform. So, from my get source I can get the source from where this particular event has been fired, and based on that I can handle the event, particular event. So, to determine which component fired the event, the value returned by get source can be compared with the variables containing the component. So, you can see here if source is equal to test button. So, if this is particular button, so then I can do a particular action. So, this is how your get source method is used in order to identify which particular event source has generated this. So, I may have n number of buttons on one particular container. So, based on each and every button, so I need to write listeners. So, for that I can use this get source method and know which source has generated, and based on the source I can write the handler. So, next is get action. So, instead of using the source, I can even use the get action command. So, the other way to determine the origin of a button press is use the get action command method. So, here this action command is nothing but the label that is given, that is the caption that is given for the button. So, while creating a button we normally give a caption and create a button. So, that is used in order to find out what is the action command. So, action command is not the name of the object, whereas this is the name of the label or name of the button that you have created. So, this method can be used only with action events such as button presses. So, here you can only use this for your action event that is raised by the button, because only on button you may have the label, whereas think that you have a choice menu. So, in case of choice menu you do not have any name that is displayed to the user, so that I can use get action and try to find out which I have to, for think that for example I have two choice menus. So, in that case I can know the name of the choice, that is your object of the choice menu I can have, and then I can do some handling process based on that, whereas in case of that you do not have label, only button has the label. So, this button and key press only could be used along with this get action. So, this get action command could only be used by button. So, in case of button press, get action command returns the label on the button, a statement that checks whether the button label testing was pressed. So, for that what I have to do, if label dot equals the testing. So, here you can see that dot equals, so this as a string. So, this string is compared with that label, and then if it is testing, so then I can write the corresponding handler. So, here we can see few methods that are available in the event classes, which could help you in knowing what type of events is raised and what is the property of the source at that particular point of time. So, you can know the state of that particular event source which has raised that particular event. So, you can see here whenever a mouse event is fired, so I can get the click count. So, this method whenever is applied on an instance of the mouse event returns the number of mouse clicks associated with this event. So, how many number of times you have clicked that particular object. So, here mouse event is raised by your mouse. So, once you start your application, how many times you have clicked your mouse will be returned or will be accessed by using the method get click count. Next is get point. So, whenever I move my mouse, so I can get the x and y position of the event relative to the source component. So, if I have a container, so I will have the x y position of the event. So, get x returns the x position of the event relative to the source component. What is the x position? So, if it is a container, so then what is the x position, what is the y position relating to that particular container. So, get y method is also that this returns the y position of the event. So, next is key event. So, whenever your key is being pressed, so your key event is raised. So, here you can have get key character method. So, this returns the character associated with the key in this event. So, what I am trying to press, I can get that particular character. So, next I can get the key code. So, this returns the integer key code associated with the key in the event. So, when I am trying to press a particular key, there will be a corresponding key code. So, next is get key modifiers text, and then I specify the integer. So, this is returns a string that describes the modifier keys. So, whether I am using a shift, whether I am using a control shift, whether I am using an alter. So, all these could be modifiers. So, these modifiers corresponding integer value. So, I want to know the type of text that has been for this particular key press. So, in this case of multiple keys are pressed and when the action need to be changed on that key. So, for example, when control and a particular key is pressed, when shift and another key, the same key is pressed. So, I need to handle it in two different ways. So, next is get key text. So, whenever I press a key, I want to know the text of that particular key. So, whenever I select an item, the item where the event occurred. So, this happens in your choice and your list. So, whenever from a number of items I am choosing one particular item, this event will be fired, and from this I can get the item and based on the item. So, I have already told you in case of card layout I use choice menu on choosing a particular value. So, I can change my card. So, that particular value could be generated, could be accessed by using the method called get item. So, you know there is a method called add item in your choice menu. So, in order to add your particular values in the choice menu. So, similarly, you have get method in order to get the value, get the item that is being selected. So, here get state change. So, return the state change type which has generated the event. So, what type of change that happens? So, what type of value change happens, you can get using get state change method. Next is mouse wheel event. So, we discussed about this. So, this mouse wheel, you know that whenever I am trying to move my mouse wheel, in that case I need to know what distance I have travelled and how many units I have moved and so on. So, you have methods such as get scroll type. So, returns the type of scrolling to be used. So, you have various scrolling methods. So, all these scrollers will not scroll in the same fashion. So, here you also have get wheel rotation. So, this returns number of notches the mouse wheel was rotated. So, how many times your mouse was rotated, you can get it from this method, and get scroll amount. So, this returns the number of units that should be scroll per notch. So, how many number of units? So, already we have seen that in scroll bar and all we have number of units that need to be moved by whenever I am trying to move that particular scroll bar. So, similarly here we have whenever I am trying to move my mouse wheel, how many number of units have to be moved for one particular scroll. So, and also for one particular scroll, how many notches has been moved. So, all these information you can get out of these methods. So, next is component event. So, here in case of your component event, we have a method called get component. So, this returns the component where this event was raised. So, the general method, what you have is your component method. So, for each and every type of components we have seen, for example, for your button you have another event being raised. So, and you have various events. So, here component is the general set of event. So, here we have one method to know which component. So, in general in order to know something has happened on a particular component. So, that could be found by your get component method. This will return a component. So, this will return an object of the component. From that you can know what component has fired this particular event. So, next is container event. So, in case of container event you can know that you can get the child of the container. So, this returns the child component that was added or removed. So, I already told you that in container you can add elements, you can remove elements. On adding or removing the event, this event is fired. So, and also you can get the container, this returns the container where this event originated. So, next is adjustment event. So, this adjustment event is particularly for your scroll bar. So, get adjustable, this returns the adjustable object where this event has originated. Get adjustment type, this returns the type of adjustment which has caused the value change. And next is get value, returns the current value in the adjustment. So, whenever I am trying to move my scroll and then I can know what is the value of that scroll at that particular point of time. So, as a summary, in this section we have seen about what is event delegation model, and then we have seen few samples, and then we also have seen list of events that gets generated and what are all the corresponding listeners that need to be added in order to listen to these particular events. So, from this we will be able to answer questions such as what is event delegation, list down the events in Java, components associated with the events, and then few methods in the adjustment events. Similarly, for all the events, just you can list down the methods. Our forthcoming session we will be having a discussion on what are all the listeners and what are all the methods that are available, that is the handlers that are available in the listeners and so on. Thank you.